The Adulting with ADHD podcast is not a substitute for medical advice. Please see a medical professional if you think you have ADHD or have ADHD and need additional assistance. For podcast archives, please visit patreon.com/adultingwithadhd.
This is the Adulting with ADHD podcast, self-empowerment for people with ADHD. Today, I'm happy to have with me Dr. Saara Haapanen. Dr. Sara is a performance scientist, ADHD coach, and international speaker. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So a little bit about Dr. Sara. Dr. Sara helps humans live happier, healthier lives through brain and body training. She's an internationally published researcher in motivation, optimal performance, and creating coaching climates for success. And today we're talking about neurodivergent-friendly workplaces. I'm going to say that again. I'm going to back up. I'm still warming up here. And today we're going to talk about neurodivergent-friendly workplaces. So Sara, before we jump in, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this field of study.
That's a long story, but I'll try and keep it short. I was an athlete my whole life. I was a diver. Now I'm diagnosed ADHD, so I know diving specifically is an adrenaline-seeking sport because your brain is not going to be. It's not normal to walk down a diving board, jump forwards and flip backwards. That is something that like normal humans, a normal brain would be like, no, don't do this. But I realized from an early age, I've always been kind of adrenaline seeking. And then fast forward, I ended up getting a diver scholarship. So I grew up in Canada, went to the University of Wyoming, and there I was studying kinesiology and health promotion and really fell in love with psychology. So I took some psychology classes and then got to participate in a graduate level sports and exercise psychology class. And it was very relevant to me. And there's a theme during the story. And when I work with all ADHDers is, am I allowed to say swears on this podcast?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
So our brain almost always works as like we give a shit or we give zero shits. It's like a light switch. All of that was really relevant to me and I fell in love and it was very like I could use it in my athletic career.
Yeah.
So then fast forward, I ended up moving to Finland to train for the 2008 Olympics. And I found out 12 days before I wasn't going because I was ranked 30th in the world and they only took 29. But I was always really interested in motivation because I had that light switch brain. So I cared about things or I didn't care about things. And I was trying to figure out if I just understood more about motivation, maybe like the normal things in life wouldn't be so hard for me. So I ended up being an internationally published researcher in motivation and studied motivation and went on to do my PhD in motivation. And then the ironic thing is I moved to the United States from Finland to start doing research. We were doing cross-cultural research on high levels of success and motivation and creating coaching climates. And I wasn't working with the people. I was just working with the data analysis and the statistical analysis. And my brain does not like that shit at all. So I got depressed. I took time off. And then my husband was like, why don't you do personal training like you did in college? Like you really like that. So I did that a little bit and realized that's an industry where if you're working for someone else, you do all the work and they take half the money. So I started my own company in 2013. And then I took 7 years off of my research and PhD. And my supervisor basically said, you have to finish in 10 years. You can't be a PhD student for 10 years. So like shit or get off the pot.
Yeah.
So I went to go read my own academic writing that I wrote and I couldn't understand it. Like, academic writing is also, the whole point of it, I feel, is to make it so no one else can understand it. It's research for researchers, which is just garbage anyways. But I thought my brain was broken. So then I got a brain scan and they're like, you have no blood flow in your frontal lobe during boring tasks. And I was like, that's what it feels like. Basically, I got diagnosed with ADHD, depression, and anxiety, TBI as well. But then I started hyper-focusing on ADHD, and I've been hyper-focused on that since. So my business prior to that was still brain and body training or kinesiology and psychology mixed together. But since my diagnosis, my official diagnosis, I've been diagnosed twice, once via brain scan and then once again so I could try meds. But my whole life made sense. Like every single thing that I thought was a Sara-ism turned out to be an ADHD characteristic. And I had created, because I'd been studying motivation and performance and how to perform at your best, it all made sense. Like I was creating and developing coping skills to be able to do the hard things because I had an understanding of motivation, which works the same way in everybody's brain to an extent. But then there's a whole part of it that's very different for an ADHD brain. Long story short, that was my story. And now I'm hyper focused on ADHD.
I love that. Yeah.
Been my journey.
If adulting with ADHD feels overwhelming, you are not alone. ADHD Online provides a diagnostic evaluation that offers personalized insights to help you navigate ADHD and beyond. Aside from ADHD, it's looking at anxiety, depression, binge eating disorder, and more. What's great about this is you can take those results and you can go to your own practitioner, or they are practitioners they can help you connect with. Listeners of the Adulting with ADHD podcast save $40 off and receive a $149 diagnostic evaluation by visiting adhdonline.com/adultingwithadhd, promo code adultingadhd40. That's incredible. Wow. I think this is the first time I've interviewed somebody with an athletic background, and it's really fascinating hearing the relationship between performance and motivation in a scientific way like that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the trainings you do with other workplaces. You talked a bit about the programs that you do, and I'm curious about those programs and how they benefit the workplaces and the employees.
So in my mind, of course, these are my programs, so I'm going to think that they're amazing. But 20% of the population is neurodivergent, right? And a high percentage, now that changes, up to 8% of those are ADHD. But my big thing that I just want to reduce the stigma. When I go and it depends what the program is, but usually I'll go in and give a presentation on what ADHD is. Here's how it shows up. Here's how you can support your employees. And the way that my programs are, they're all scientific based, but I say that they're universally designed. So regardless if you have ADHD or normal brain or neurodivergent, they're just going to be a little more fun and entertaining than a normal presentation would be. But my goal, if I'm just going in there for one workshop, and I really like to, because humans, especially adults, only retain 50% of information 1 hour later, and a week later, 24 hours, they only 70% of that is forgotten, and a week later it's 90%. So with ADHD brains and all brains, but specifically our brains, because of our light switch, like we care or we don't care, it needs to be relevant. What I like to do is give them education, but also give them an understanding of your brain with ADHD is actually wired differently. So you can't just tell an ADHD try harder or focus if they don't have any skills of how do they focus, what do they need to do. And what I really love doing is I always start with, here's a list of superpowers. Here's what ADHDers are amazing at. Out of the box thinking, if you need to brainstorm, if you need someone to come up with ideas that aren't like your typical fit into like black and white thinking, brainstorm with an ADHDer. Like they're going to think about things you've never even thought about because their brain is so used to. I always think it's like a normal person has a flashlight. Like you tell them to focus on one thing and they have their flashlight and they can look at it and do it. And an ADHD brain is more like a floodlight. So it's seeing everything all at once, the bigger picture, but it also is seeing like it can hear the electricity, it can see the squirrel that just walked by, it can read everybody's intuition is a huge thing. And because of the way that our brain works to pick up on these small cues, like it's just a very different brain type. And it's not that it's a disability or it's just a difference. So I really like to start with here are the positive attributes, but also you have the other side of here's what we're not really good at, like planning ahead, or we might be super, super engaged in the way that our working memory works. But right after that, if you don't have the skills as like a boss, a manager, a leader to know, first of all, to know that human might have ADHD. And I always say a diagnosis is not required. But if you think you have ADHD or you're working with someone who you think might have ADHD, just treat them as if they do. Even if they don't, it's not like you can't do this whole life thing wrong. So it's, let's say you leave a meeting. You need to specifically ask an ADHDer, do you know the next step? Do you have your to-dos? Here's a list of priorities. Because our brain, it's also very challenging to be able to prioritize. Like everything might see, and a lot of my one-on-one clients, I'll be like, let's do a brain dump because everything is going to swirl and swirl in our brain until we like get it out onto a pen, piece of paper, like not necessarily typing it out. You want to write it out because you have different neurological connections. But then I help them prioritize because in their mind, often everything has the same priority. Like it's all urgent right now. And just as much as I know about motivation, which is based on the self-determination theory, I'm going to get sciencey for a while, but don't worry. There's a reason. There's a reason. So there's 3 things. This has been proven across cultures in business and sport and just like real life. 3 things. And a way to remember is to think of a car. So CAR. The first thing is competence. And competence is you have the belief that you can do the thing. So you might not have the skill yet. For instance, when I first bought this house, I did not know how to install a toilet, but I knew that if I watched YouTube videos, I would be able to install the toilet and I could learn. So I was competent in toilet installation. And now, 10 years later, I've installed 3. But like you have the belief that you can do something. That's important. Then the next one is autonomy. And autonomy means that it's your decision. So I do personal training and health coaching, and often I'll see it in my business. It's like I train someone and they want the same results for their significant other. And they're like, can you do this to my significant other? And I was like, let me talk to them and see if they actually want this because normal humans too, but especially ADHDers, if someone wants us to do something and we don't want to do it, have fun. That demand avoidance is going to really kick in and you'll be like, no, thank you. But even that it can be a perceived idea of choice. So another example that I use in the gym, I want them lifting weights. So I'll be like, do you want to do 15 pounds or 20 pounds? And they still have a choice. And this works great with children. So if you have children who need to leave the playground, we know how hard this can be, especially a task transition for ADHDers is super hard. You can ask your child, do you want to skip to the car or do you want to run to the car? Either way, they're getting to the car, but they have a choice. Otherwise, they might fight you on it because they want to have autonomy because that's a basic need. And then the last one is relatedness. So you want to be, as humans, we're meant to be on this planet with other humans. So you want to be in a community surrounded by people who are doing what you're doing, who have the same ideas, or even just being around other humans. Like we need that as human beings. So competence, autonomy, and relatedness, excuse me, are the 3 basic psychological needs. So you need those to be motivated to do anything. But then, knowing what I know about ADHD, I created this acronym that then works for ADHD humans. So I always love to talk about this. If you can write this down for the listeners, write it down. So the acronym is called FUNK with a C, not a K, and then MS. So the F stands for fun. If we are not interested, if it is not a fun thing, we are not doing it because our brain is lacking dopamine. The second thing, U, stands for urgency. So we need deadlines. We need it to actually, what happens usually is we don't have a level of anxiety until it's like very last minute. And then we can have enough because we're lacking stimulation, right? Dopamine is basically the motivational hormone, but the thing that's missing. So because we don't have that the way that a normal brain works, We need almost like a peak in anxiety so that we can get enough stimulation to start doing the thing. So the U stands for urgency. N is novelty or newness. We like adventures. We like new things. We don't like doing the same thing all the time. Like certain jobs are not good for ADHDers at all. Like you're not going to want to have the same repetitive thing all the time because we will literally feel brain numb. So no thanks. We need newness and novelty. C stands for challenge or competition. So often we can't necessarily do that with someone else, but you can always do that with yourself. So can you do better than you did last time? Can you do it faster than you did last time? Whatever it is, if you can bring a challenge into it, if you can challenge yourself or compete with other people, that's great, but depends on the circumstances. Like that's not always realistic. And then M stands for movement. And although I'm a fitness person, it's not necessarily what you think it is. Like you can't see me, but I have a fidget ring. So movement means moving your body. That's going to allow you to have enough stimulation so your brain can focus. I wrote my PhD with a vibration platform under my desk. This can also be like, I'll see people in the airport. I travel a fair amount to speak. Or the person sitting beside me, I'm also going to be like, do you have ADHD? But a lot of people who have ADHD don't know it. They're still like, the guesstimate is like 70% of people are still undiagnosed. But I can see it, especially when I'm sitting at conferences and people are bored and they're just like shaking their foot or they're still like fidgeting or rocking on the chair. And I was like, we do it without even knowing because our like subconsciously our brain knows that's what like chills us out. So we can focus on the conference or presentation or flight or whatever you need to do. Yeah. And then funk MS. So the last one is social. It's related to the relatedness from the self-determination theory, but also in the sense of having others around you. So body doubling is a really huge thing that helps with motivation and getting stuff done. Often you'll see, I know cleaning is a real issue for us, but someone comes over and all of a sudden we're like, they're standing there trying to have a conversation. We're like wiping our countertops off and starting to put stuff away. And that's been on your to-do list for weeks, but you didn't give a shit until someone came over and sitting there in front of you. Not that they're judging you or anything, but we need that external other humans around us. So for me, I go to a coffee shop and I pretend that everyone is looking at my computer and they know that I need to get my website done. And they're looking at me and I'm like, yeah, okay, this is motivating for me. For a lot of other people, they'll be like, I need quiet. I was like, no, I don't need quiet. I need lots of stimulation so I can chill out. But so the Funk MS model is specific to ADHDers to get motivation levels up. So if you feel like something's hard, one of those things is missing.
Absolutely. That totally tracks for me as you were talking. I'm starting to think of what kind of movement I can do after this while I'm working. Because that sounds totally spot on.
Yeah. Like before you go on my back patio, I have a hammock chair, a rocking hammock chair. And if I need to read or even just sit on my computer, just sitting in motion is great for our brain. Oh, yeah.
That totally explains why I have to have wheels and spinny chairs. I can't stand sitting on stationary ones. And it's so obvious. I don't know why I never thought of that until now.
Yeah. You can also sit on a big ball, like a physio ball. Oh, those are great for moving. But when you're on video, it makes the other person uncomfortable, especially if they're like, why are you moving so much? I need to.
So you covered a lot of ground. I know we had discussed these questions ahead of time and seems like you've answered them, but I'm going to ask them again in case But we were going to talk about some of the most common challenges you see when you're working with people in these programs. What kind of problems are you solving for them when you go speak for them? Are they asking for this kind of direction or?
ADHD training for a lot of organizations right now is like a nice to have.
Yeah.
I think it's really popular. ADHD is really popular more on the individual setting. And there are certain organizations that are forward thinking and really want to have a better support system for their employees. But I think there's a lot of organizations out there that don't have funding, don't really think that it's an issue. And it also depends on the industry. Like, I would say in tech or game development, like a high percentage of those people are neurodivergent. They know they're neurodivergent, but also a challenge is on the female side, because how ADHD shows up in a lot of females, like they're high performers and they're people pleasers and they've had their masks on for a really long time. And they've always been able to like function at a certain level. And what I usually see is they're one of two things usually happens. Their kid gets diagnosed and they start doing research on ADHD and they're like, oh, this sounds like I have this brain. I'm like, yeah, it's genetic. 55%. Like, it's either they got it from you or the dad or the grandparents or someone in the family has it, or they're perimenopausal or heading towards menopause. And when that happens, your estrogen drops. So dopamine and estrogen are on the same plane. Like, as one drops, the other drops. All of a sudden, they don't have coping skills. They don't have everything that they've used before that has worked is no longer working. And they feel like really scatterbrained. They can't hold on to information. They have brain fog. They're not remembering things. And there is still such a stigma of, if you're a professional woman, you can't have it. And it's challenging. Someone who's very close to me, who has the same genes that I do, went to a professional for a diagnosis. And he basically said, this is a 6-year-old little boy disease and you can't have it. Like, you're a functioning woman who's doing very well. And I was also told in 2013 that I could not have ADHD by a therapist. And I think just speaking about it, the more people know about it, I think it's going to be easier to get into organizations who then want to support their staff, and making that connection from, depending on the industry, because some industries of course have more, but if you support these people, like, your ADHDers are your rock stars, because when they are hyper focused, if they give a shit, if their light switch is on, they're going to work so much harder in less time to get the thing done. And if they're the ones who are the out of box thinkers, they're the ones who are solving problems that other people have tried to solve. And if they're just thinking very black and white, that's not going to get. So being able to support those employees is going to be phenomenal. But certain industries and certain people, if they believe it, it's really easy to work with those. But it is hard to change someone's opinion on what ADHD is and how I can help train your humans so they can perform better, and everybody wins.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're going the awareness route at the individual level, which makes total sense. And these programs, I think you answered this, but these programs, how do you integrate them in real ways? It sounds to me like you're reaching them on a visceral level that they can retain much longer after you've seen them and really start seeing their ADHD coworkers differently. Is that how you're seeing this pan out? Or let me rephrase my question. What's the potential impact if programs like this start getting more adopted? How can this really change the day-to-day for everyone, really?
I think you're going to have a population that's happier and healthier. And I think reducing that stigma and realizing that this is just a brain difference. It's not a disability. There's nothing wrong with these humans. They are phenomenal at certain things. Everyone has their expertise, right? And I always like to say, I try and help humans work with their brains and not against it. And the easiest way that I explain this is because the world is not designed for a neurodivergent human. Like, you think of school, you sit still, here's very specific times that you do things. And okay, I'm being a hypocrite here. So ADHDers do not love schedules, but we do need schedules. Yes. So what I find often is athletes and military people do amazing in their athletic career and their military career, and then they graduate from that to the next step of their life, and they're like, oh crap, I have ADHD and I don't know what to do with all this time, and no one's telling me when to show up and what to do. And we resist that, but that's exactly what our brain needs. Yeah. And I think once we can support the humans who have ADHD and to help them work with their brain and not against it. So it's as if you're an Apple phone and your whole life you've been trying to use the Android instruction manual. And you're like, why is everything so hard? This isn't all working out. And once you learn how to work with your brain, then you get the Apple manual and then everything starts to make sense. And you're like, oh, this is how I should be thinking. This is how I should like incorporate urgency and novelty and fun. And like maybe I should be focusing 80% of my time on the things that I enjoy and outsource or get someone else to work on like the spreadsheets and the planning ahead and because a lot of us, especially females, tend to be people pleasers and perfectionists. And so we will spend 10 times the amount of time on tasks that we are really bad at because that's expected of us. And I think when you give education to organizations and how they can design a workplace or have some one-on-one training with the actual ADHDer of how can you design your day? What should you be spending your time on? What are you good at? And get someone else to do this stupid spreadsheets. But there are ADHDers who love spreadsheets. Don't get me wrong. But whatever that skill is, that 20% that you're spending 80% of your time on, and it's just a waste of everybody's energy. Not only would it increase productivity, but for the business, that's going to be like a better ROI or like you might only have to have the ADHD or if it's working on its passion, like working 2 days a week, that could save you money. But they're like kicking out work 10 times more than your neurotypical over here who's like a generalist and is good at everything. Like a hyper-focused ADHDer, I would take 10 times out of 10 over a regular human if it's a task that I need done. So just working with your brain and not against it.
Absolutely. And where can listeners keep up with you and your work?
drsara.com. So my name is spelled Saara. Sarah with a bonus A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Saara. It was really great having you here, and this was such a value-packed episode.
Awesome. Thank you so much.